Hey everyone, I'm Jay, and today we're going to do another lab, 6.13. We're going to be making some functions and doing some math, some prompting the user for information, and we're just going to kind of put together a bunch of the stuff that we've done so far into one small program. So what this program does is we're going to have a main game loop. I call it a main game loop. All right. The program's going to continue to run until the user selects the exit command. Uh, we're going to prompt the user with an input menu. They're going to make a selection from that menu. Uh, and then we're going to, based on their selection, we're going to call a function that's either just going to uh, add two numbers, subtract two numbers, multiply two numbers, or divide two numbers. We get those two numbers from the user. But really what we're going to see here is some of the organization and how to put a while loop together and how to organize some if statements within there, um, and some of the ways that we're going to uh, kind of loop through and reuse information and try to be kind of efficient with what we've learned up until now. So I have my main function. I've defined main as a function, just like we did in our previous lab, right? So if I can go down to the bottom and bear with me, I'm trying to zoom. Here we go. And go down to the bottom. Hopefully you can read my code better. I'm zoomed in today. I've defined main and I have if name main at the end. So if we are the primary file that's being run, we're going to execute the main function. If not, we're not going to do anything. Okay. If this file is included in a larger project, then the only thing we're going to do is add the functions. Okay. We're actually going to add the main function, but it's probably not going to be called. It's probably going to be skipped over by Python because they don't want to have multiple main functions, right? So we'll be adding these other functions here. Okay. And if I can zoom back to the top here. There we go. I'm also using PyCharm today, uh, giving that a try. Normally I've been using, up until now, Thani and VS Code. I like both of them, and PyCharm is new to me. It is more dedicated to Python, but it does have a lot of squigglies that do kind of help with formatting, so I like that. But let's dive into our main program here, our main function. First thing I'm going to do is output a welcome message. Welcome to this simple Python calculator. Very simple. It does only the simplest of calculations. Okay. And then I have my main loop here, which pretty much all of my main function is going to be within this one loop until the very end when we say goodbye. Okay. And so I've preloaded this with a variable called game over that's set to false. And I'm going to continue looping for as long as game over is not true. Okay. I like to set game over to false. And then as long as we are not in the game over condition, we're going to continue to loop. That makes sense to me. Right? Hopefully it makes sense to you. As long as we're not in the game over condition, we're going to keep running. We're going to keep doing this loop. And you'll see later we get some input from the user. If they select the exit command, then we'll set game over to true, and then we're going to exit the program. Okay. So first thing we're going to do is set some default values. I've set the user's choice initially to 0. That's actually equal to the exit command. Okay. And I have some placeholder text and a placeholder sign, which we'll see here in a moment. We'll see what we use that for. We need some placeholders for the messages that we give the users. Okay, and then I'm setting these values. I'm setting the first number, the second number. When we ask for the user to input, we're going to either add two numbers or subtract two numbers or whatnot. I'm predefining those and I'm setting them to 1 by default. Normally I set things to 0 by default, or some number that, some really large number perhaps. but I'm setting it to 1 and not specifically not 0 because I don't want to accidentally divide by 0. So I'm not setting it to 0. And then I'm setting the result to 1 as well. And I think, yeah, I'm using result. Okay. Result is colored differently, as is the placeholder. I believe because I am only defining those again later on in if statements, and PyCharm thinks that there is a possible solution or a possible situation where I never use these variables. And that is true. If the user exits immediately, I won't ever use those variables. But they're not likely to exit immediately very often. And if they do, we really don't care that we're not using a variable because we're not using the entire program at that point. All right, so I have my default value set. Next, I'm going to prompt the user and I'm going to say, make a selection from the menu below. And I have my selections right here. Enter either 1, 2, 3, 4 or 0 for the selections. And as you'll see, we go through the if statements, and I don't really care if they enter 0 to exit. If they enter any number other than 1, 2, 3, 4, or anything other than 1, 2, 3, 4, actually, then we're going to exit. Right? We're not doing a lot of error handling in here. If they type in weird numbers, for example, we can't account for that. We could, but we're not doing it. So this is within the loop, so that every time the program reruns, it tells them the menu options again. Because I would hate for somebody to be using a program and they were like, okay, make your selection. And they're like, I don't know what my choices are. I forgot. This one's pretty easy, but what if the choices were more complicated, like look up employee information or something like that? Like you want them to know which choice is which, so you got to tell them each time you ask. So this is within the loop. So basically, it's the first part of the loop, right? We did our default values, and then the first part that we're actually doing something actively, we're telling the user, hey, here's the menu, here's your choices, and then we're going to get their choice afterwards. So I'm going to get this selection. I am going to force it to be an integer. Okay. I could convert it to an integer later, but I chose to just force it to be always an integer. So if the user inputs like an A, it's going to break the program right here, okay, because we're forcing it to be an integer. So once they've made their choice, we're going to say if it's equal to 1, we're going to set these placeholders. So we're going to set the text to add, the sign to plus, and we also have this value of 1 still. Okay, so we actually have 3. If they chose 1, we have 3 things. Okay. Technically speaking, it's not safe to trust user input, so I wouldn't want to use this value, but I know that it's equal to 1 because I've said if it's equal to 1. So I can be reasonably certain it's a safe value that's equal to 1. What can we do with that, right? So I have a 1, an add, and a plus if they've selected 1. I have a 2, a subtract, and a minus if they selected 2, a 3, the word multiply, and a multiplication symbol, sort of, if they chose 3. And for the last one, I have a 4, the word divide, and a division sign if they chose 4. If they chose anything other than 1, 2, 3, 4, I've said game over is equal to true. Next, I need to check if it's game over, okay? Because if they chose to exit the program, I don't want to ask them anything else. I don't want to ask them for inputs. I don't want to say, please input your first number, please input your second number. If they chose to exit, I'm going to skip all that. So if I'm not game over still after getting input from the user, then it's okay, right? It's okay that my while loop is going on, game over, and I'm checking that it's still not game over again, right? It's totally okay to check that value again within the loop because I really do want to make sure that I'm not outputting or asking the user for information that they've already told me they don't want to do. If they've chosen to exit, I'm going to test for that and then skip the entire rest of the program. Okay. Assuming they have not chosen to exit, if it's not game over, I'm going to ask them to put in their first number, and this is where that placeholder comes in. So I have that placeholder text. I said number 1 is equal to the integer value I'm casting to an integer. Please enter the first number to blank, and I'm putting that placeholder text in there. So if they chose add, if they chose 1 for addition, that placeholder text is going to be add, and it will say, please enter the first number to add. Number 2 will say, please enter the second number to add. Right? And I've added a little space right here, just so that at the end, when they input, their inputs will line up with each other, so it doesn't look funny. Okay, these were one space off because the words first and second are slightly different in length. So I added that one space right here, where I think it would be the least intrusive. Now, they've given me their two numbers and they've made their choice, and I need to check what their choice is again. Okay, I really can't check their choice the one time up here and just check it the one time, because when I've checked it up here, I still need to get their input. I could have created a function to get their input, and then I'd have to pass the function, the placeholders, and it would just add to that level of complexity. For me, it was much easier to just say, yeah, let me put it down here, and I'll do a real quick if-else ladder again. If the choice was 1, I'm going to set the final result to, I'm going to call my function add integer. I'm going to pass it number 1 and number 2. Right? So if it's 1, we're going to add. If it's 2, we'll subtract. If it's 3, we'll multiply. If it's 4, we'll divide. In each case, it's pretty similar. And then as soon as we've gotten the result of that, we're going to print our solution. This one's a fairly complex formatted print statement, right? I have a few things going on here. I'm going to print solution, and I'm going to put number 1 in here. Okay, so I have format number 1. Number 1 goes in there. Then I'm concatenating the placeholder sign. Okay, so remember I set the placeholder sign to the plus in the event of addition. So I'm going to concatenate a plus sign there. I'm going to concatenate again, have a space, have another spot right here for a formatted value, and another spot right here for a formatted value. And I'm going to format and put number 2 here, and finally the result over here. So in the event of addition, let's say that we did addition, we did 1 plus 1. This will say solution colon 1 plus 1 equals 2. And hopefully our math checks out. And that will be the result. We'll print a new line right here. We'll just do an empty print statement, right, with an empty string. We'll just print a blank line. And the loop is going to cycle again once it gets here. It's going to cycle again because game over is not true, right? There's no way we could get into this area here if game over was true. So game over is not true, and we'll loop again. Let's say we want to exit this next time. So we'll come down here. We'll put in exit. Okay, it's none of these choices. We'll set game over is equal to true. We'll skip this whole section because game over is true. And then we'll print goodbye. So that would be that. The functions called are pretty simple. Let me scroll my screen here. All right, so the functions are very simple. I have a function add int, subtract int, multiply int, and divide int. Each one takes 2 arguments, an a and a b, and then it just returns, in the add case, a plus b. Return a plus b. I don't even need a variable for this because it's such a simple function. It just does one thing. I give it an a and b, and it returns whatever the result of a plus b is. The next one, I give it an a and a b, and it returns a minus b. The next one, I return a times b. And for the division, I return a divided by b. If we're making a real calculator, we wouldn't be using only integers. We would be making sure we never divide by 0. We'll be doing a lot of stuff, but as the beginning of our program stated, we have a simple So we're just testing out, we're putting together some of the things that we've learned so far. We're putting a bunch of stuff inside of a loop, a couple of if statements, a nested if statement. You can put one if statement here, do something, and then continue and put more if statements within the other if statements. All right. In Python, make absolutely sure that you tab over correctly all of your lines. Okay. Every time you go within some section of code, so we go within the main function, everything is tabbed over one. Within this while loop, everything is tabbed over one. Within this if statement, everything is tabbed over one. Coming back out of the if statement, this is not tabbed over. And going back in this one, it is tabbed over. Other programming language, we're going to use squiggly lines, curly braces, right? In Python, we just tab over, tab over. All right, so that is lab 6.13. We're going to be doing some math. We're going to use some functions, put basically everything that we've done in the labs up until now, put it into one thing. All right, so that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.